It was a snowy night, and the crowd around Donald Trump was growing by the minute. People gathered together, caught up in the magic of the evening as snowflakes danced down from the sky. The snow settled over them like a warm blanket, and in Trump's eyes, there was a light shining in the darkness. But this night wasn't just about celebration. In the middle of the crowd, a little girl asked Trump a question that would change everything. It wasn't just any question, it was one that made everyone pause and think. The air was thick with curiosity. What would this simple yet profound question lead to? Could it turn this moment into something unforgettable? As Christmas magical vibe wrapped around the city streets, the crowd on New York's famous Fifth Avenue moved with quick steps as if racing against time. Meanwhile, a soft breeze blew in the background. On that cold winter evening, the wind gently swayed the trees along the street, and the fresh, crisp air that winter brought filled the lungs with every breath. The sharpness in the air seemed to keep the whole city awake. A cool, breezy gust left a chill on the faces of those walking down the street, some of them tucking their hands into their coat pockets, while others wrapped their arms tightly around themselves. Snowflakes clung to their shirts, scarves, and coats, shimmering under the streetlights, each one turning into a tiny crystal. As people walked down the street, there was such a deep silence that sometimes the sound of the wind echoed in their ears. Everyone felt like they had stepped into another world, surrounded by the snowy scenery and Christmas lights. The colorful decorations in the windows, combined with the snow above, made everything seem instantly more magical. In the midst of this atmosphere, the flow of the crowd slowed for a moment. Everyone's eyes sparkled with the same brightness and hope as the dazzling Christmas tree lights. Children gazed in awe at the snowflakes falling to the ground, some trying to catch them with their hands. Sometimes, with the wind's influence, snowflakes falling to the ground would suddenly float through the air, and everyone would turn and look for a brief moment in wonder. And then, right in the middle of the square, the event surrounding the breathtaking Christmas tree was happening. Everything had truly turned into a Christmas fairy tale. Children were raising their hands in joy, running and shouting, throwing snowflakes at each other. Volunteers around Santa, dressed in traditional red outfits, were greeting the crowd as if they were extras around the tree. This year's event had become truly unforgettable, especially with Trump's participation. The crowd surrounding the area eagerly lined up to get their gifts. The excitement of the children, waiting all year for that moment, was clear on their faces. The sparkle in their eyes said it all. The hope of each child was hidden in the gift boxes they held in their small hands. At that moment, a little girl, moving faster than the others, began to bypass the line. As I carefully watched her, I noticed something. She was different from the other kids. Ignoring the crowd around her, she walked with determination toward something, holding a small notebook in her hand. Her blonde hair shimmered under the snowflakes, and her eyes carried the deepest meaning of innocence. Wearing her tiny, yet very stylish, red dress, the girl's steps seemed more pronounced than ever. All eyes in the event space suddenly turned to her. It was as if time was slowing down, creating that one moment when everything around her suddenly made sense. The girl's eyes, without caring about the crowd, were fixed on Trump, who was standing in the middle of the square. It was so clear in that moment. No one could guess what the little girl was trying to do. She was simply moving forward with strong will and determination. As she passed through the crowd and the security guards, Trump began to look at her smiling face. When the girl got closer to him, the atmosphere around them completely changed. Everyone seemed to pause for a second, as if they had forgotten something. Trump bent down to see that moment more closely, observing the little girl carefully. The magic of that moment felt like time had stopped for both of them. The girl, calmly but sharply, looked at Trump and said, "Mr. Trump, have you seen God?" Trump, for a moment, didn't know what to say. A second later, the entire crowd was wrapped in the magic of that moment, and it fell silent. The air felt heavy, as if the girl's question had made it so. Trump responded, his eyes full of uncertainty. "No, little lady, I haven't seen God," he said. But then he paused for a moment. As everyone in the event space watched, every word slowly echoing in that moment, Trump continued, "But I've always seen signs of God. When people help each other, when they're loving, God is there." Taking a deep breath, Trump added more meaning to his words. Santa delivering gifts is a reminder of how much God loves us. The little girl's face lit up when she heard Trump's answer. She smiled as if she had found exactly the response she was looking for. The whole crowd suddenly focused on her. But the most interesting moment came when the little girl responded to the answer. The girl quickly flipped through the pages of her small notebook. In that moment, Trump and the crowd focused on the writings in her notebook. As her fingers moved across the pages, a wave of excitement spread through the crowd. Trump, for a moment, made eye contact with the child and watched her closely. Finally, the little girl raised her head and walked toward Trump. It was as if time had stopped once again. The girl's eyes were searching for meaning, and that search was directed at Trump. Slowly but firmly, the little girl asked, "Well, is Santa Claus God's helper?" Trump paused, thinking for a moment. As a few different thoughts crossed his mind, he smiled gently and tilted his head, replying, "Yes, maybe he's a little reflection of God." In that moment, the crowd fell into another deep silence. But Trump, pausing for a moment, added, "But we can all be like Santa. When you help someone, when you smile, you're part of God's plan." These words deeply impacted not only the little girl, but everyone in the square. Children embraced each other, and families looked at each other with hopeful smiles. The little girl quickly wrote something in her notebook while the crowd soaked in every second of that moment. As snowflakes, blown by the wind, gathered again, each one seemed to fall like a symbol of a small piece of innocence. For a brief moment, everything was forgotten. The Christmas lights, the sound of bells, the falling snow, and the joy of the people surrounded every moment, leaving a mark in the heart of every spectator. That moment was as simple as Santa Claus and God's love, yet deeply meaningful. The moment when the little girl smiled had found a place in everyone's heart. The atmosphere of the story felt more intense than ever before. The magic of that moment had deeply touched everyone. The light of hope in their eyes surrounded them, just like the sparkle of snowflakes. The little girl's question, Trump's response, and the silence that spread through the crowd had turned that night into a turning point. The crowd slowly began to move again. Some people smiled at each other, while others sighed deeply and stuffed their hands into their pockets. The children, with tiny shovels full of snow in their hands, rolled up their sleeves and began to play. The wind, after the previous silence, had grown stronger. But no one was complaining about the cold. On the contrary, it felt like everyone was experiencing the moment in a kind of sacred atmosphere. After reading a few words from her notebook, the girl turned slowly toward Trump and spoke. "Everyone needs help, right? This simple question changed the atmosphere once again. Trump took a deep breath, wondering how to respond to such a simple yet meaningful question. The crowd refocused on him. "That's right," Trump said, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Everyone needs help. And maybe the real meaning of Christmas is hidden in helping each other. Each of us can make life more beautiful by touching the lives of others." The little girl seemed to have understood something from what Trump said. Slowly nodding, she turned toward the crowd behind her, and a light sparkled in her eyes. It was as if in that moment she realized that Santa Claus wasn't just a legend, but that each person had their own Santa inside them. Once again, there was silence in the air, but this silence carried a depth of peace and meaning. Everyone seemed to absorb the moment, their eyes watching the snowflakes fall gently to the ground, their hearts beginning to beat in rhythm. Trump looked back at the little girl and thanked her. "Giving hope to everyone isn't easy," he said. "But tonight, you've become a beacon of hope for me and for all these people." In that moment, all eyes were on the little girl. There was an inner peace and contentment in her eyes. The small but powerful message the girl gave to Trump and the crowd touched everyone's soul. Slowly, the crowd, which had fallen silent earlier, began to move again. People began to slowly spread out, walking through the streets, each searching for a new meaning. But none of them spoke to each other. They simply looked into each other's eyes, moving forward as they delved into each other's hearts. The city, blanketed in snow, felt the weight of this silent night more powerfully than ever before. Children with small buckets and shovels full of snow began to return. Some of them, while reflecting on what Trump had said, walked with a spark in their eyes. Trump walked toward the security officers in the crowd, telling them that he would remember this night. "Tonight, for some of us, will carry a different meaning," he whispered. Trump tilted his head slightly, giving the crowd one last look under the Christmas tree. It was as if he was certain he would always remember that moment. Such a simple but impactful event had the power to change the world in an instant. The hope of the people around him had found its way into his world. As he slowly wrapped up the night, the Christmas lights around him began to glow even brighter. The lights fought against the darkness surrounding the city, but the darkness had completely vanished for this night. The little girl, after thinking for another moment about the words she had written, was still running around with the other children, playing in the snow. Every step she took was a source of hope, a source of love. Because she was, in one sense, a hero changing the world, and in another, just a child. But with the confidence in her heart, she knew she could inspire the whole world. There was a spark of life in her eyes. That spark showed that Christmas wasn't just a holiday, but a source of hope. The wind began to blow again. This time, the snowflakes drifted gently to the ground, and as the light shimmered toward the little girl, everything seemed to move into another dimension. The whole scene seemed to bring back the lost hopes of everyone once again. As the city was wrapped in snowflakes, each individual walked forward with hope in their hearts. Each snowflake seemed to carry a different life story, each one carrying a different dream. But that night, one thing was certain. Every person had once again understood the value of helping each other. And at that moment, every snowflake fell like a beam of hope. The fall of the snowflakes symbolized the slow rebirth of dreams that had once been lost. Each snowflake left a trace as it fell to the earth, and those traces traveled from heart to heart. The pale light of the street lamps in the city blended with the whiteness of the snow, lighting up the night. Everything had become calm, yet carried a deep meaning, as though it were inside a fairy tale. Trump walked through the crowd for a while and made his way toward the little girl. Behind him, the lights of the Christmas tree continued to shine, casting a different light on the surrounding snow, the wind, and everything else. People moved through the streets, gazing into each other's eyes, sharing their warm hearts in the cold air. As the little girl approached Trump, she turned slowly, her eyes sparkling. She had asked, "Can everyone help?" But now, she realized that her question had revealed the greatest power within everyone. Slowly, she took a few steps back and decided to join a group of children. The children were laughing, throwing snowflakes into the air. One of them showed a small Christmas tree buried in the snow. Around it, a large heart shape had been made. "We made this for you," the child said, with all their sincerity. Trump looked at the scene, and for a moment, he fell into deep thought. "I've never seen anything like this before," he said to himself. Seeing people not just passing through this snowy night, but living creatively and building something together, brought him great peace. That night, something deeper than a competition or a prize had been formed. Helping and reaching from heart to heart was the truest way for people to exist together. The snow in the air intensified with the gently roaring wind. People stayed a little longer, hugging each other, with tiny lights in their hands and smiles full of joy. Trump lowered his head slightly and took another moment to look at the heart-shaped snow figure the little girl and the other children had made. The bond between them was stronger than any words. The feeling Trump had, and the feeling the crowd shared, was what made that night special. A few minutes later, the children on the corners of the streets had begun new games. Some were playing snowball fights, while others danced around the snow-covered trees. One of them reached out their hand toward Trump and asked, "Will you join us?" Trump, captivated by the magic of the moment, smiled. "Of course," he said, "but first make a promise. Remember every moment we've shared here tonight and never stop helping." Many children simultaneously replied, "We promise," with joy, and the words echoed in the air, spreading like snowflakes. As Trump joined the joyful crowd, he took a deep breath, drawing in the peaceful atmosphere around him. His eyes slowly landed on a small child who was making her way through the snowflakes, fully immersed in the magic of the moment. The child rubbed her hands together and made a heart shape with her fingers. Behind her, the snowflakes continued to fall. Time seemed to make that moment even more precious. And just then, the dance of the snowflakes began to speed up, turning into a snowstorm. Yet, neither the wind nor the snow could interrupt this magical moment. As Trump watched the children, he felt the peace inside him deepen. "Tonight, we are all together," he said. And at that moment, everything became real once again. The unity of people could create a world filled with hope and love. As the snowstorm intensified, the yellow light of the street lamps began to glow faintly like pale stars amidst the whiteness of the snow. With every step, the sound of the snow seemed to transform into a soft hum, as if holding a secret. Trump, with his hands in his pockets, continued walking slowly, watching the crowd. Everyone had the same warm smile on their faces. The cold air highlighted the warmth of their hearts. The children's laughter echoed in the air, along with footprints left in the snow. At one moment, As one child threw a snowball, another child's laughter followed. It was a quiet inner peace that made time feel so meaningful. Trump began to observe the people around him more deeply. As they drew closer to each other, they were sharing not just the beauty of the snow, but the beauty of being together. In their eyes was a glimmer filled with hope and joy. He realized that they were in the midst of a moment where difficulties, the pains life had brought, and the broken hearts hidden within each of them, were healing through the power of togetherness. They were creating warmth in the cold, embracing one another. Slowly, a child's voice reached his ears. "Let's create a memory together," the child said. The children began gathering around a large pine tree in the middle of the snow-covered area as if they were little artists. They weren't just playing. They wanted to create something. As they carefully scattered snow around the tree, others began to dance around it. Trump, captivated by the magic of the moment, watched as the heart shape around the tree became more defined. A few minutes later, one of the children sat down, gathering snow with their hands to create a small figure. The others bent down to help. Trump watched these preparations closely. He felt as though he was learning something from them. The hope in each child's heart was transforming into great power. The bond between them was proving how a small act could change life itself. The little girl approached Trump again. This time she had made a flower figure, a tiny creation formed in the snow. "I made this for you. Can we create a bigger flower together?" she asked. Trump smiled, bent down, and took the small flower into his hand. "Of course," he said. Together with the children, they began to create a flower made of little snow figures. Though made of snow, the flower seemed to carry life, hope, and love within it. Each piece was a work of art they had created together. The crowd grew larger and larger. People, joining one another amidst the dance of the snowflakes, felt they had come to share the magic of that night. The snow had settled over everyone like a blanket. In Trump's eyes, there was a light that appeared in a darkened world. He knew he would never forget this moment. A few minutes later, the streets became even more crowded and the lights reflected more brightly. As everyone moved in a circle, Trump stepped into the crowd. Everyone seemed connected, like small sparks lighting up the night. A few snowflakes, like a reflection, shimmered in the air. In that moment, people were connecting heart to heart. Slowly, their laughter blended together, and warm hands joined in unity. Trump approached a child and, with arms open, hugged them. The child was surprised but happy. In that moment, the child felt the beauty of life as a gift and realized how precious real togetherness could be. The child whispered, "Thank you," tears welling up in their eyes. But these tears were not of pain. They were the tears of joy and hope. "Life, even in its darkest moments, can offer light," Trump said, taking a deep breath. The magic of the moment seeped into everyone around him. Gradually, everyone gathered around the large flower shape and joined their hands together. The streets lit up with the glow of the Christmas tree. The wind moving through the air had transformed into a melody. After a while, the snow continued to fall. But now, the snow was no longer cold. It symbolized a warm bond. Trump took a deep breath and looked around. Everything suddenly made sense. The beauty hidden within challenges was being revealed as unity allowed them to find one another. That night would remain like a fairy tale. As the night came to a close, the streets were filled with a sense of warmth and connection that had not been there before. The snow continued to fall, but it no longer felt cold. Instead, it symbolized the unity that had blossomed among the people. What began as a simple gathering had turned into something much more meaningful. The little girl's question had sparked a chain of events that reminded everyone of the beauty found in togetherness, kindness, and hope. It was a moment where hearts met, where strangers became friends, and where a shared sense of belonging washed over the crowd. The lesson was clear, even in the darkest moments. When life seems uncertain or divided, there is always the potential for light and warmth to shine through. It doesn't take much, just a spark, a simple question, or a shared smile to bring people together. The magic of that night wasn't just in the snowflakes or the festive lights, but in the connection between individuals, the understanding that we're all part of something greater than ourselves. It was a reminder that hope isn't something we wait for. It's something we create together. By the time the night ended, everyone left with something more than they had arrived with. The laughter, the hugs, the quiet moments of reflection, all of it became part of them, something to hold on to. They knew that life would still have its challenges, but now they had a newfound sense of strength. The knowledge that, when we unite, we are capable of making even the darkest of times feel brighter. That night was a fairy tale, yes, but one that everyone could take with them into their lives. A story of real magic that lived in the hearts of all who were there. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Your feedback means a lot to us.